Lobelia was another plant which of recent years became in use in medicine, and it was originally named by Linnaeus after Dr. Lobel, physician to Queen Anne, author of a great herbal, a man who helped Gerard quite a lot with his herbal. And Lobelia syphilitica, top left, was a plant which grew in the United States. And the European settlers were looking for a cure for syphilis. They knew that syphilis had come from the Americas, and they believed that the Creator would have put the cure for syphilis in the same place as the illness came from, a bit like nettles and dock leaves, same place. And after pestering the Native Americans for a number of years, the Americans said, yes, we will confess, we do have the cure, but it'll cost you a lot of money. And for a very large sum of money, they sold Lobelia syphilitica to the European settlers, and ever afterwards, well into the middle of the 19th century, medical botany authors wrote, its American reputation is not borne out, is not borne out by European practice, has no effect on syphilis whatsoever. But Lobelia is a treatment used as, produced lobeline as a treatment for tobacco addiction. And it's also smoked by the Lobelia tupa is smoked by the Mapuche Indians in Chile as a hallucinogen. Lobelia has lots of interesting chemicals in it. Now we'll quickly go through other poisons, and this is deadly nightshade, again Solanaceae, and the effect of atropine on the eyes, belladonna. Atropine drops are still put in the eyes to dilate the pupil, and so ophthalmologists can see the retina more clearly. And the drops, I say, were put into Italian ladies' eyes to dilate their pupils and make them look much more sexy. And so short-sighted they had to come up really close to talk to you, which was much more fun. Atropine is rather nice in that it's named after Atropos, who was the third of the Fates. And it is one of those plants which is a cure for poisons. If you are exposed to organophosphorus poisons, as in nerve gas shells, if the cry of nerve gas shell goes out in the Iraq War, the soldiers used to get into their pockets, pick out their syringe of atropine and inject themselves, because atropine will sit on the acetylcholine receptor and block it and stop the organophosphorus from getting in and permanently blocking that nerve receptor, and the organophosphorus can then circulate around the body harmlessly and be inactivated by the liver. So that is one of the plants which is an antidote to a very nasty poison. But that's how it works, by blocking acetylcholine receptors. Jimson weed, full of scopolamine, and called Jimson weed because in Jamestown in the Americas, the settlers there were rebelling against British rule, and the army was sent to deal with the uprising, and the settlers fed them with the seeds of Jimson weed, and they became intoxicated, and for one whole week were intoxicated and sat around with no clothes reciting poetry or singing songs, and when they woke up after a week had no memory of the event, an indication of the long-term effects of atropine poisoning from a single dose and the amnestic properties of scopolamine. And angel's trumpets, Brugmansia, used to be called Datura, again full of scopolamine, and you just have to rub the leaves and rub your eye. There's enough chemical in there to give you a dilated pupil. And just like deadly nightshade and mandrake leaves are used as a poultice for muscle pains, I used to rub this plant with my fingers and get people to sniff the chemicals on it. I did that for 2 days running for several different tours of the garden, and my fingers remained numb for nearly a month. I think it kills nerve endings. I don't think it's a simple analgesic. And even to this day, they're not quite right. Anyway, so it's got some analgesic properties. But you can make a tea from it and drink it and hallucinate it with it, and you can also smoke it, and it used to be used to relax people in smaller doses and as a treatment for asthma in the National Health Service. If you go to Kew, you can see these lovely big cheroots of Brugmansia cigars, and you smoke that when you felt an asthma attack coming on. And capsicum, again Solanaceae, but contains capsaicin, which blocks pain transmission. And there are a few plants which one wonders how or why they were used. And Equisetum hyemale was used from the doctrine of signatures because it gave you a good flow of urine. You know, I stand there at the garden waving one of these things in front of me and people get quite amused. But anyway, that was used for treating cystitis. But unfortunately, if you take it in too strong a dose, it gives you a most appalling hemorrhagic cystitis and you pee blood and have a painful bladder for several days. So it does have some action on the bladder, but not one you'd like. And Origanum dictamnus, dittany of Crete, it was used to stop bleeding. And like many hairy plants, Stachys byzantina, hairy plants were thought to be vulneraries, and why they worked or how they worked is not quite obscure, is a bit obscure, why people thought they worked, but maybe they work like cotton wool. When you cut yourself shaving, you put it on a cut place and the hairs make platelets agglutinate, and from there the myth of them being good for stopping bleeding if you drank them as a tea may have arisen. Poppies were a good example of magic because they, do you know who Pion was? Pion was the physician to the gods on Mount Olympus. Dr. Pion, best private practice in the business. Yes? 2 minutes, you haven't got a chance. Anyway, so epilepsy, it was treatment for epilepsy, and you hung the peony root around the neck of somebody with epilepsy and it cured their epilepsy. Yes, sorry about that. And the reason it worked was for childhood fits, with febrile fits of children teething. You could nail a brick to a wall and the fits would stop. It was self-limiting condition. And as one distinguished pathologist said, everybody dies after their last meal. And our early herbalists could not tell coincidence and cause. Angelica gigas, anticholinesterase, upright stems for impotence, foxglove you all know about, and extracting digitalis, digoxin from digitalis lanata is what we do nowadays. But the whole story of William Withering and how he discovered foxglove is another matter. And I'm not going to have time to do it. Antimalarials, again, Chinese medicines, and the Chinese, in collaboration with the Americans, eventually got artemisinin, a really very powerful antimalarial. Some things didn't work. Dichroa febrifugia was used as an antimalarial for fevers in China, but when they extracted dichroin from it, 60 times more powerful than quinine for treating malaria, but too toxic, it made you vomit. So they fiddled with the molecule and came up with methaqualone, which was the basis of Mandrax, the sleeping pill. So the pharmaceutical companies worked very hard. Quinine and willow need no explanation. Aloes, very interesting that inside of the aloe is made into aloe vera tea and aloe vera creams and things like, but the outside of the plant is poisonous and produces bitter aloes, and purgatives, contains anthraquinone, same as senna, very powerful purgatives. But the juice is widely used for treating burns, including by the Japanese after Hiroshima, and it produces a little physical barrier on the burn which stops infection. I won't tell you about senna because it paralyzes your gut, and I won't tell you about ricin because you will know what ricin is. The outer casing produces ricin, the inner bit produces castor oil. St. John's wort, not just a simple pure herb, it works a bit like as an antidepressant by inhibiting 5-hydroxytryptamine metabolism, but it interferes with the metabolism of contraceptive pill, with warfarin, and with anti-AIDS treatments, and stops them working. So while it is an effective antidepressant in mild depression, it does have its side effects. Things like vitamin C, of course, were obviously now used, but of course we didn't know about vitamin C deficiency. And things like Drimys winteri, which were used by Captain Winter on Drake's voyage around the world as a treatment for scurvy, remained for 200 years a treatment for scurvy until Dr. Bland on the right introduced lemons as a treatment for scurvy. But they still thought that the cause of scurvy was a humoral one. The hot-feeted conditions in the holds of the ships produced too much hot humour in the person's body, and so blood oozed out from the teeth and from the skin. And lemons were a cure.